Since A.B.A is a character defined by her major differences between being in her normal mode and her install, I've separated each section into two parts, but there will be a little overlap since some sections transition between installing and uninstalling. A.B.A's 2P and 5P are fairly standard defensive pokes. Her 2P is much more useful since it doesn't whiff on crouchers and is a 4-framer, making it better for defensive uses. 5K and 2K are good pokes, with 2K reaching just a little further, but 5K does have a bit of low crush potential. Since they're both 6 frames, 2K is generally more useful, and they're especially good since they're active for 5 frames. Adding in the dash macro right before pressing it is nice for extending the range a little bit. Just be careful about defaulting into 2D as a cancel since it won't reach a max range. Instead, it's better to go into 236S and confirm the hit into a follow-up of 6S for a knockdown. Far Slash is an advancing poke with low recovery, making it decent in the mid-range. It doesn't have a ton of range, but adding dash momentum can help. Since it's advancing, it easily gatlings into the H follow-ups of 5H and 2H, but you can just default into 236S if you prefer. 2S is fairly unique in that it's an anti-air. It being 7 frames makes it a faster anti-air than her 6P, and with much more vertical range. It also has better reward on hit, so when possible, try to use this to anti-air. Her 6P is fairly standard and will still be useful in some situations. It'll just take experience to get used to when to use each anti-air. 5H is an important normal since it's her farthest reaching option. At 15 frame startup, it's fairly slow, but covers a large range. There's a good amount of disjoint, which makes contesting it near max range pretty hard, and even if they punish it, it's hard to follow up on. Its biggest weakness is them using air options to get around and punish it. But if it's blocked, there's a lot of pushback, so even at -15 with no cancels, it's hard or impossible to punish. At farther ranges, 236S will whiff, but is still the go-to cancel when in range, so try to stay aware. A 236K as another cancel option is nice since it goes further, but is worse on hit. Depending on the spacing it hits, you could end up between -2 and +2. The pushback can also be useful for canceling right into install, leaving you only -11 and far away. The reward for counter hitting is great, so overall this will be one of the more important tools in neutral. 2H is mostly used for pressure and combos, and 6H is exclusively used for combos. JP is your best air-to-air option, which can combo into key grab, but it does rely on being close, so try to confirm it quickly. JK isn't very useful. JS, while being short range, does hit both sides, making it useful for cross-ups. Since it's short ranged, it isn't good for air-to-airs. Doing it from IEDs can be good, but unless you delay it, you'll be negative. IED FD can help with this. JH is very slow with no disjoint and angles upwards. It's not very good, but I do find myself using it more than I thought I would simply because it's her only option to hit them from far away in the air. JD instantly makes her halt air momentum and fall to the ground. It's good for baiting anti-airs and can even crush slow 6Ps. Mixing it in with IED-JS can be decent, but overall it can be a nice way to stay unpredictable. And it being up to +5 on block while easily comboing on hit is a nice bonus. 236K is an advancing mid that crushes lows. It can crush some mids, but requires specific timing. It's -2 by default, but if you hit it on the later frames, it can be up to +2. Not that you can make much use of the plus frames when you're spaced out like this though. Overall, it's a nice tool that can bridge the gap between moves like Far Slash and 5H in terms of range and speed. And pairing it with RC can make it a good neutral skip. 214K is a command dash with low profile built in. It's a useful tool for getting around major mid pokes and fireballs. 236S is a Rekka. There's a very large cancel window which goes into a low follow-up by doing 6S after hit or block. Having the large cancel window is nice to force respect, and same goes for the low. There's no disjoint on it, so it's nothing crazy for neutral, but it does have decently good range, slightly beating out Far Slash. It's mostly used to convert her normals into pressure or knockdowns. It being -5 on block makes it a fairly good pressure ender, especially with the pushback, and the follow-up Rekka hit is -15. The pushback can make it hard to punish, but how hard you get punished heavily depends on the matchup. But keep in mind it is whiff cancelable, so the threat is always there even if you miss the first hit. 214S is her parry. It has guard point from frames 7 to 22, so it's not always the easiest to use on reaction, but it does build 25% jealousy rage meter if it's successful. This is the main tool that keeps her viable against projectile zoners since it lets you build resources while playing defensive. The main flaw is that even on a successful parry, she has a lot of recovery, which may force you to block follow-up pressure. The frame data counter doesn't track it properly, but you can see just how much recovery there is, especially if you parry a quick button like a 2K. So depending on the matchup, it may be better to force your way in with 214K going under their main neutral options. If you're trying to react to faster options, stick with 214K since it's frame 3 low profile compared to frame 7 parry. Her key super can be used as a reaction punish from anywhere on screen, but becomes much better in jealousy rage. Her H super will give you jealousy rage, aka JR meter, and transition you into install. In normal mode, she's tied for the slowest walk speed, back walk speed, and the slowest initial dash speed in the game. Her backdash is also the same speed as Potemkin's, but has the 6 frames of invul, which is nice. Her jump arc and air dash are nothing crazy either, so basically she has some of the worst movement in the game. This makes it so when you burst, you're putting yourself full screen with the worst movement, so choose when to burst carefully. Jealousy Rage can be entered with half circle back punch. Once you enter JR, the meter drains at 10% per second. If you manually uninstall, you gain back half the meter you lost during that rage. In this mode, she is tied for the fastest walk speed in the game and ties Chip for top 3 initial dash speed, and her jump arc is better with a faster fall speed. When the JR meter runs out, the screen freezes and you get 1 frame of invul followed by 10 frames of throw invul, and you can only block during this time. If you run out of meter during a combo, when you recover the freeze will happen, and even if you mash while blocking, you'll only get block. This can lead to lucky situations if they don't realize that you'll have throw invul and tried to do it during pressure or Oki. All normals that use the key got adjusted, and all moves got a slight damage buff. Far Slash is down to 9 frames, is more disjointed, and reaches further. 2S jumps from 7 frame to 9 frame startup, but it has much more reach. It becomes a giant wall against air approaches. 5H drops from 15 frames down to 11, and drops a whole 15 frames of recovery off, making it a much safer poke with still good range, but it does sacrifice a good amount. The speed up, increased disjoint, and reduced recovery down to -5 on block makes this an almost complete upgrade, but you may miss the extra range a bit. This speed up does make it a true string option by default, unlike normal mode. And it pairs very well with Far Slash to lead to easy knockdowns. But Far Slash right into 236S still works nicely. 2D got a complete rework in that it becomes a double hitting low. It's still exclusively useful for pressure and Oki. 2D becomes much larger and disjointed at the cost of being a couple frames slower. And while 6P does use the key, it doesn't change outside of the damage buff. JS loses its easy cross-up potential, but is much better for air-to-airs having a slight forward disjoint. IED JS is +3, and Dash Jump JS is a nice neutral option. Doing this opens up one of her best mix-ups with a fuzzy. And if you land it high up, using a double jump to mix up your timing can be good. JH becomes the better cross-up option. It has a ridiculous amount of range for an air normal and ground bounces. This is one of my favorite air normals in the game since it's so good in so many situations. JD now doesn't halt your air momentum. It's almost primarily used for pressure and combos since it wall bounces. It does have a nice disjoint, but the launch makes it hard or impossible to combo unless you're near the corner. Her specials got changed as well. 214K goes much further, which makes it better for approaching against mids and zoning. 236K now ground bounces, making it a useful combo starter. It stays -2 on block, which is nice to have, just be careful doing it too close using dash momentum since it's throw punishable. Even point blank in the cornered spaces unless you dash. It also becomes an overhead. Comparing the mid and low crush against the regular mode, you can see she goes on top of the key, pulling a hurt box much higher. This makes it way better at avoiding mids and lows. 2D6S gets a very nice range buff and drops from -5 to -2 on block, making it a very strong cancel option on hit and block. The follow-up pops up nicely, letting you OTG for some strong Oki options, but stays at -15 on block, so it's still important to hit confirm. Since the pair's main function was to build JR meter, in JR mode you can't use it. Instead you gain the JR exclusive special of Danzai, or DPH. It's a very long total duration move reaching 70 frames, but has guard point from frames 9 to 45. It also has 2 gigantic hitboxes that can lead to big combos on counter hit or if they're airborne. On ground hit, all you get is an OTG. But the guard point makes it useful against reversals on wake up and as a way to run up and bait counterpokes. It being +4 also helps, but being spaced makes it hard to take advantage of. Since it has long duration, it can be whiff punished, but it's not as easy since you need to stay far away for it to whiff. Running up into Danzai is also great since it has an amazing anti-air hitbox. Her supers got drastically buffed in JR mode. Her H super has a bit of a double-edged change. On the plus side, it eats up the rest of your JR gauge to do more damage. It does bonus damage based on you having over 20, 50, or 75% gauge, so when using the super, try to optimize around having as much JR meter as possible once the scaling kicks in. The downside is that if it doesn't kill, you'll be back at 0 JR gauge, which can make neutral and pressure after it pretty rough. The key super jumps up from +6 to +49 on block, making it a strong option to use in neutral. A.B.A doesn't have the best, but far from the worst round start options. Far Slash is your 10 frame option, but it doesn't reach unless they also press. 214K can be good to avoid mid pokes and advance against retreating options, but you'll still be negative and vulnerable to low options. 236K works well as the opposite option, crushing lows, but it is more likely to lose to mids. 214S can be a decent option if you think they'll be aggressive to build a little JR meter. 5K and 2K are solid options to counterpoke their slightly slower options that would reach around start, and 6P is pretty nice for catching mids. 236S being 12 frames is a little more risky, but it reaches around start, and going into the follow-up will catch people walking back with the low. If they're defensive, you can either backdash into install, or just install immediately. Finally, Superjump A.B.A can be a way to approach while going around their options. For normal mode neutral, since her movement is very lacking, you'll need to be patient and rely on dash blocking in a lot. Dash 2K and 5K will be your go-to close range pokes, dash far slash or 236S will be the mid-range pokes, and 5H will be your long-range poke. Since she's very slow, it lets your opponent generally control the pace of the game, and they'll tend to try to stay outside of your range as much as possible. This leads to 5H being one of the most used buttons since it lets you fight back from far away. Even though there's not much direct reward from a max range 5H, even hitting or making them block it will build you JR meter, which is very important. You can bully your way in by doing 5H into Wild Assault. Even if you're spaced out, it sets up for her strong stagger pressure, so it's still worth it. But if you build enough JR meter from making them block or getting straight hits, doing 5H into install is a nice option. Since 5H's main weakness is jumping, be sure to be patient sometimes and wait for them to try to jump at you and then anti-air with 2S. IDJS can be a nice tool, but don't use it too often since the range is pretty limited and it's not a very fast option. 236K is one of her stronger options in the mid-range, especially if you have RC to back it up for pressuring combos. And remember, when fighting zoners, parry is a nice way to build JR meter, but be careful about doing it against very plus projectiles since you may immediately lose neutral. Start working on your decision making for when to parry and when to command dash under projectiles. Something important to get used to is buffering 236S after your pokes like 2K and far slash so that it'll come out when they connect. Here you can see I input 5K and 236S and it only comes out on hit or block, then just be ready to react and follow up with Rekka for a knockdown. When in JR, your mobility is top tier, so while you are on a time limit, you don't always have to run headfirst in since your whiff punish game is so strong. The changes to far slash and 5H make them incredibly strong pokes and always combo into 236S. But if you don't feel like playing neutral, run up Danzai is very strong. Just remember that it is frame 9 guard point, so it can be stuffed. Dashing 236S has a ton of range, so it can be a good jump scare option that sets up nice mix-up options for Oki. And this gets much better with RC, giving a mix-up or full combo. Even if you don't have meter, it's only -2, so when looking for a hit confirm, seeing them block lets you react with a backdash or go into stagger pressure. Same goes for when you're buffering 236S after far slash or 5H. Use your movement to mix up going all in or stopping short to try to make them scared and counterpoke. Since her jump arc is much longer and has a faster fall speed, her air approaches become much better, especially with her better air normals. Dash jump JH is amazing since it's huge and gives high damage combos. Remember that it can easily cross up too. 236K is one of the key tools since it carries momentum really well and crushes mids and lows while being a combo starter. Just remember from before that it is throw punishable if you end up close to them, so try to be careful about the spacing. For normal mode pressure, her options are a bit limited. It's hard for her to make use of the plus frames due to her slow dash speed, so she can't easily set up throws. Close slash can stagger into 2K, but it is a 5 frame gap. Instead, the better stagger point is far slash since it's only -3 and advances. Adding in a micro dash does make it a little slower, but you might put yourself back into close slash range. Once you show you're willing to stagger, start canceling into 2H. If they just FD the whole string, you'll be pretty far back and you can end with just 5H if you want to space yourself out. But if they FD you out, it sets up 236K to be 0 roll on block. And it shows they're willing to commit to blocking, so throwing in 214K can be a way to steal space back. Key grab with 214H is a strong pressure tool that leaves her +2 while advancing and guard crushing. There's a good amount of pushback, so it can't be looped too much. Back to 2H, it true strings by default, but can be slightly delayed for a frame trap. 5H will never true string. Slash first hit 2H into key grab is a way to set up plus frames while staying true string. The benefit of doing just the first hit of 2H is that it keeps you closer, which is especially important against FD. Close range 2K 2D also true strings into key grab. After key grab, since you're +2, 2P leaves only a 2 frame gap, so it's best when you're close, but 2K is the next best, leaving a 4 frame gap for possible trades. If you're feeling greedy, you can far slash after key grab, but it will lose to a lot of mash options, so make sure to threaten a 2P or a kick. So in general, try to mix between far slash into itself, into 2K, into 2H, and then setting up key grab. Since 236S has such a large cancel window, learn the timing to make it frame trap. It being -15 makes it scary to use, but that also may make them think that you won't do it, making them want to mash. So get the timing down to discourage them from mashing. 236K is another cancel option, and it can frame trap to discourage mashing, and it being -2 can set up some backdash versus 2p RPS. After staggering to build JR meter, go into 5H to space yourself out, and go into install. This gets better if they FD. Just make sure to threaten frame trap 2Hs to keep them scared. In the corner, you can stick to the far/stagger pressure, and if they FD, 236K is a good way to try to reset the situation. As you get a little more advanced, you'll start mixing together different stagger points, making them want to fight back. For JR pressure, close/staggers become much better since her dash is much faster, but now canceling directly into 2H gives a double hitting low to catch backdash or throw attempts, and you can delay it to frame trap. 2D is also a nice low, but 2H being slower and double hitting is better when pairing with 236K since it's an overhead in JR mode. But doing 2K 2D versus 2K 236K can also be good. That and close/2H versus close/236K are the main ways to set up her high-low. Convert 2D and 2H with Danzai, and 236K will ground bounce for easy conversions. On block, the typical cancel will be 236S, which leaves you -2. This sets up for mash versus backdash RPS. 2P being your fastest option makes it the best if you choose to mash, but you can do 2K if you think they'll pick a slower option or try to stay defensive. Backdash will lose to bigger pokes like far/, but 236K can crush options like this. If they block a 236K, you'll be -2 in the same situation, so represent backdash and quick mashes as you need, but start to gauge how they react in these situations. Even 236K into itself can work, but less likely if they do something like 2K. And it gets blown up if you're too close to them. It's much better if you're spaced. And it's risky, but you can go for a throw if you're close and catch them out of a slower button, or potentially tech and mistime throw by them. You can fit in far/ before 2H or 236K too if you want to extend the basic pressure and add in another point to stagger or hit confirm. Going into the follow-up is risky, but it's important to enforce, especially if you have RC to save yourself. Throw is a strong option, but generally I'd try to avoid it since it eats up a good amount of JR meter since the animation is not so quick. Danzai being +4 is nice, but you'll always be spaced, making it hard to enforce. After 236S into the follow-up, there's no way to get a safe jump in normal mode, and it's hard to close the distance. If you are already fairly close, dash into far/ works well. But since it gives you so much JR meter, it's generally best to go into install and dash 2K. It leaves you +13, which is enough time for the dash 2K to be meaty. You can be a bit more risky and dash up 236K for an overhead that also catches backdash. Dash 2K can catch backdash, but it's not as reliable and harder to convert off of. For throw-oki, IED-JD for same side, or walk into IED-JD for a cross-up. You can also do an early one to whiff and sneak in a low, but JD isn't an overhead, so it's more tricky than a real mix-up. In the corner, OTG with 2H into 214K, and close/meaty to build more JR meter. Also in the corner with key grab, hold up forward into falling JH for a safe jump. Ending with the Rekka makes it easy to meaty after install, but you can OTG 2H into install to get a little more JR meter before installing while still being plus. If you do both hits of 2H, you'll be spaced out and less plus, making it harder to run offense. Ending with 236K leaves you plus enough to dash up and key grab for a meaty. Doing a micro dash into key grab can make it up to +5, but it is a bit risky, especially if you do it too early. With 5K into close slash is an easy way to get an extra meaty close slash, but it's hard to follow up if they FD. And of course you can use the threats to go for a throw. But the frame data is the same even after a combo like this, so it should be consistent. When ending with the Rekka, OTG close slash into jump forward with JP into falling JS for a safe jump. This one setup will cover most of the knockdowns you'll get since you'll end practically every combo with Rekka that doesn't wall break. When key grab hits and puts you in JR mode, dash up 2H and 236K both hit meaty for a high low. In the corner for throw, jump into whiff JP, then land 2K for a very meaty low. For the overhead, do air backdash JS into far slash. For a normal safe jump, whiff 5P into JS. When wall breaking with super, dash jump whiff JP into JS for a safe jump. For the essentials section, I just want you to focus on getting the basic combo structure down. Practically every hit you get will just go into 236S and the follow-up of 6S for a knockdown. From 2K and 5K, 2D is nice to fit in if it'll reach, but it can be risky, so it can just be better to do 2K or 5K right into 236S. 5K and 2K do combo into key grab too. For pressure, you'll be doing far slash 2H a lot, and this can go into 236K or 236S, but generally you should just do the 236S. When 5H is spaced out, you may do Wild Assault and just convert into the basic combo. For counter hit 5H, cancel into 214K and get a close slash into the basic combo. if you had already input Toothy Success, you still have enough time to // and continue the combo. When starting in JR mode, same as before, pretty much everything goes into Toothy Success. Make sure you pay attention to how much JR meter you have left so you know whether to go for the safe jump or run up and uninstall for the meaty. If you get a move that pops them up like 2D, you can do Danzai, then run up and combo into Toothy Success. For counter hit // and 5H into Toothy Success, when close enough, 2K 2D Rekka will combo. Since learning this character is almost like learning two characters, the goals before moving on to the intermediate guide will be to get a feel for her normals and specials in both modes, learning the ranges you can and can't combo into Toothy Success, get a feeling for when you should uninstall and how to go about doing it as safely as possible, and finally when you're able to hit people with basic mix-ups in Jealousy Rage mode. Thank you for watching.